Alright guys, so now that you've heard that, let's get started on making that tune. The first thing you want to do is go to the description below and download the pack that I have for you guys, which includes the samples and presets used in this tutorial. Once you've downloaded that, just extract that to a folder on your desktop and make sure you can access it from within FL. The first thing you do once you open up FL is bring your BPM down to 122, and then we'll insert our first silent one. Wait for that one to load up, and we're going to work on our basses for the start of the track. I almost always use bass to start my track out, as I feel it's one of the most important things to really fill out a track. So for our bass preset, we're just going to go click on the menu button here, go to preset, go load, and then we'll go to our desktop and we'll find that tutorial folder, and we'll select bass 1. And that sounds a bit like this. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and create our bass tune. So I'm just basically, when I make my basses, I mess around and sort of just get a feel for what I want the track to sort of bounce and feel like. And when I'm happy with something, then I move on from there. So give me a second, I'm just going to make up something here. Alright guys, so I've come up with something here, and this sounds a bit like this. Okay, so the sway of the basses happens when notes overlap, so anything that overlaps will sway. And anything that has a gap or doesn't have any overlapping will be solid notes. Now that's controlled by the portamento inside Silent 1. Now when I was sound designing this sound, I added a mono legato because I've only got one note that's controlling the sound as we go through. There's no chords or anything. I've selected it to note so that we can do that overlapping, control how much sway is happening there, and then how quickly it drops to the pitch of the next tone you have in here is controlled by this portamento knob here, and that's how we get that sound. Once we load that up, we'll bring up our mixer and we'll link it into a channel, and we'll go on to our next sound and we'll come back through in a moment. For this sound, we're going to open up a Silent 1 again, and I've sound designed this next one to be suitable for a mid bass. So we'll go to menu, preset, load, and we'll bring up bass 2. That sounds like this. You can hear that's got a lot less low end, so we'll highlight that and we'll link that to a channel as well. And we're also just going to copy and paste the same because it's going to be a layer. So you can highlight this green knob here, or a little selector, Control C, Control V on the one below, and they'll both run together. Now, the first thing we'll do is we'll go into a mixer and we can highlight a solo channel by right-clicking on one of these green nodules here, and that'll solo that particular sound. First thing we're going to do is clean up the space. I always EQ every sound that I bring in, so always link it to a channel, and I'm going to EQ it. And that'll go like this. Right-click on number 1, go Order, Steep 8, and that controls how much of a shelf you have. If I did steep 6, slightly less shelf, and if I go back to 2, a very swoopy sort of shelf. And this I'm going to bring right to the corner, and then I'm just going to push a little bit of extra load on the bottom here, and then I'm going to go to my main level, bring that down, go and right click on number 7, Order, Steep 8, so I'm creating a top shelf, and we're just cutting off that top end, and play that back. Basically, we're just cutting out any frequencies that that bass doesn't need. Next, we'll go and we'll add a limiter, because I want to chop off some of the tops of this sound. So you can see on our lowest volume notes, well, basically based on their frequency, they don't resonate quite as loud as a note. We're just chopping the tops off of those real quick. Let's play that back. Pretty straightforward. That's all we're going to do for this sound now. We're going to go into mid bass next, and we'll solo that. Now this is where it gets a little more interesting, because we want to turn this into a crunchy type mid bass, and we want to pan that stereo wide and take out the lows. So first we'll bring the volume down because we're about to distort it, which usually pushes the volume up massively. And we'll go to our slot 1, and we're going to add a fruity fast dist. And that looks a bit like this. Pretty simple on this one, really. Everything stays up, and you're just going to mess with this pre. So if we play it back, nothing, and then I quite like how that sounds. Now we can bring the volume up a wee bit. Without it, with it, you can tell a huge difference. Next we're adding our EQ2, and we're going to follow a pretty similar pattern that we had on the previous bass. Order, steep 8, bring that down, take out that low end. Now we're going to do something a little different. When you've created a low shelf like this, you can right click on the channel you want, and you can go type. Now I can select high pass here, and that means that I'm going to have a high pass frequency that's going to cut everything out. Now you can tell the difference between the two because it completely cuts at that low end, and with the two we're just going to push down even more to create a nice swoop and cut all this low end out. We're really focusing on this midsection here. And for the number 7 we're going to do the same thing, except this time we're going to create a low pass, and we're just going to drag it back. So you sort of want to keep it around sort of say 8 to 9,000 hertz and about 100 hertz, 150 hertz, and that's sort of the mid range that we want to keep for this bass. Next part, we're going to add a little bit of reverb to this one. Actually, we'll drag that down. You can use that by using the scroll wheel on your mouse and just highlight over the one you want. It'll switch it in the channel line. And we're going to go to Fruity Stereo Shaper and bring that in first. So we'll just turn this reverb off and we'll work on the stereo shaper. Now a quick preset is number 2, Stereoize 2. So you just go up here, preset, Stereoize 2. Close that out. Okay. And the difference is, this is what the sound sounds like now. And then with the stereo shaper. Now if you're wearing headphones, you'll definitely be able to pick up the difference there because it stereos it left and right. And that's all we're going to do for that. Next we're going to add in our Fruity Reverb 2. By the way, what we did with this Fruity Stereo Shaper is called stereo imaging, and we'll be doing quite a bit of that with some of the other sounds as we go along. Okay, in the Fruity Reverb 2 here, just follow what I'm doing. I'm going to bring this high cut up to about, say, 10k. You can see it up in the corner here, 10.0 kilohertz. Low cut we'll bring up to about 500. Decay we're going to sit around 2 seconds, 1.8 actually, and we'll bring our bass down to about 50%. Our wet will come down to about 25, and now we'll just mess with things as we go along. Bring that wet up a wee bit. Low cut can come down. And we're going to add a slight little bit of pre-delay, about 20-30 milliseconds. And together now. Bring the volume up a wee bit. And you can see how much of a difference that makes after putting those effects on. Finally, for that slot, we will put a limiter on it and just chop the tops off again. Making sure that all of our notes, all of our channels individually are not really pushing anywhere over negative 12 decibels. So you see that my bass is sitting just under negative 12. So I can scale that back slightly if I want, because I like to sit most sounds around 15. That's because as you start adding more and more sounds, the master channel volume gets pushed up and up and up. So if you start now nice and low, everything blends better and there's no jumping and ducking between different sounds. Next we're going to bring in our leads, so we're going to insert another silent one again, and once we bring that one up, we're just going to open it up and load up the presets that I have for you. Menu, preset, load, find my pack, and select lead 1, which sounds like this. Pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to mess with some lead sounds and sort of make a little pattern that is bouncy and is a little bit different in the bass, and I'm going to use it on a 7th, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes up, and we'll just have a little play. I'll be back in a second. Alright guys, so this is what I've come up with here, and please do take note that this preset does have portamento with slide as well, So these notes will be moving around too. And we'll solo it so we've got it by itself first. And together with the bass. So it sounds pretty cool. So we'll link that into a mixer channel as well. And we'll solo that. So we'll go ahead and add our next Silent one again, because we're going to work with two sounds here, two layers. And with this one, we are also going to load up one of my presets. So we'll bring up the plugin, menu, preset, load, and finally number 2. Okay, so once that comes up, we're going to copy and paste the same in there, and we're also going to link that one straight into a mixer channel. And this one sounds a bit like this. It's a very different type of sound. And for starters, we're going to work on this main lead here and make this a bit more exciting. So for starters, we're going to bring in our EQ2, and we're going to cut out that low end, which we don't need, and we can also select it as a high pass as well to get rid of all those low frequencies. We're going to use a steep 8 on the number 7 here, and we're going to push a little bit of highs to mid-range, but we're going to drag it back a wee bit on this tops just to keep it a bit more focused on the mids than the highs. Play it back. Make sure to bring this master adjustment down so that our EQ sits right flat on 0 with the highest point. Play it back. Okay, next we'll add a delay, and we're going to use Fruity Delay 3 here, and I will show you what to do with this plugin. We're going to bring our wet right down to say 12%, 10 to 12%, something around there. We're going to bring our delay model to ping pong, and we're going to whip our pan all the way to the right, and then we're going to change our time to 3.0. Next we'll bring our feedback level down to say 25% and play that back. Which sounds pretty cool, but I want to take the tops off, the high frequencies off that delay. And you can do that with this cutoff section here. If you turn it off, it won't be doing anything, but we're going to go for LP, which is low pass. And with that, we can bring the cutoff down. So originally it sounds like this, and we bring it down, and you can hear the difference. I'm going to set that at about, say, 1500 hertz or so. 15 to 17, somewhere around there is pretty good. Cool, and we're going to add ourselves a reverb too, and we're going to do a pretty similar one to the bass we had last time. So we'll bring our cutoff to about 1000 hertz. High cut's actually going to come up a lot higher to say 16 kilohertz. I'm going to bring our decay to say 2 seconds flat, or pretty close to it, and a delay we're going to have about 40 milliseconds in this one, and our wet will come down to say 20, and we'll mess around with that. Going to bring our damp back actually to about 12 kilohertz, 12,000 kilohertz. Cool, and then we're going to go to our slot 4. I'm going to add a stereo shaper. And what I'm going to do is actually push this up in the channel rack so it goes before our delays and reverb so that the sounds can still bounce left and right and they're not fully stereoed. Okay, so we're going to use the same preset, but just the one below it actually. Stereoize 3, which sounds like this. Okay, and after that we're going to add a limiter and just chop the tops off ever so slightly. Bring the volume down a little bit so it's sitting around that area. And we're going to repeat a pretty similar process with the next sound as well. So we're going to add in our EQ2. We're going to cut off our lows. We're going to put a steep on our end here, cut a wee bit off, push a bit of highs and a bit more mids, bring it down. So it's similar to the previous model, but just a little bit of adjustments here and there. And then we're going to go and load in our delay 3. And we're going to go for a pretty similar preset. We're just going to push our wet up to about 15%. And then we're going to do the same thing that we had with our previous sound. And we're just going to put our cutoff a little bit higher. Play that back. And again, another reverb 2, and repeat the same process. So pretty similar type of noise that we're going to be having with our effects, but that's all good. We're going to push a little bit more decay time, 2.4 seconds, and the same, very similar type of delay as well. And we're going to go about 25% for our wet. And then of course, I should have added this one in first, but if we go stereo shaper, do a bit more imaging on this, we're going to bring this up, and we're going to hit this one with stereoize 3 as well. Play that back. Together. And then with the bass as well. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Next piece to add in is our kick. So we're going to insert, actually no, we're going to find inside FL our, well, my tutorial folder, which you've extracted to the desktop. If you can't access it, go to Options, File Settings, click on one of these nodules here, and just double click, click on the folder, and then click OK, and it'll load it in here, and you'll see it instantly appear on your left. Then you can highlight that folder, open it up real quick. And we're going to use the kick that I have in here, which is VH3 Kicks number 28. Drag and drop. Oh, just loading that one in. Cool. So we're going to load that, and we're going to drag that straight onto a mixer channel. Link it in there, and we're going to go to a new pattern. Just going to go into pattern 2, name it pattern 2, and to add quick 4/4 beat, we're just going to go like so. Right click, fill each 4 steps. First thing we'll do is we'll open up the sampler window, which looks like this, and we're going to shorten this kick because the trail is too long, and if the kick is too long, it's going to mess with our bass frequencies, especially in this genre, which means they're going to bounce around and be a little awkward. So a really short, tight, punchy kick is exactly what we need. So we're going to go with it out and adjust that. You'll hear the difference. So this is the original kick, shortened, massive difference. It's just a little punch. And we're going to go to our mixer channel here. First we'll bring the volume down because we're going to put a little bit of compression on this one. But first we'll EQ, and we're going to follow the standard process that I always do with my kicks. I'm going to push my lows quite a bit. So we've got a nice solid punch here. So it looks like a nice hump like that. And then we're going to put a steep 8 on my 7, which is the top end, and cut it off a wee bit. We'll create a bit more of a slope here. So it should look something like that. And then we drag it down so that our top adjustment is just on 0. And you can see those values here. Next part, we're going to go to Fruity Compressor. Bring that up. It should load a little faster. There it is. And there is a little preset that I like to use on this one as well, and that is drums. Play that back. Now we can start pushing that volume up to about -9 for the kick. And I'll show you the difference. This is with no effects, with effects. Much different, much different. It's got a nice punchy low end. It doesn't have a little click on the top. We can bring that back a wee bit if we want to. We can do that by just bringing the 7 out and bringing the 6 up. And then we get that again. Okay. Also, of course, our limiter on the kick too. We're just going to take the tiniest bit of the tops off here. Just like so. So you hear the sound. Sounds pretty much the same, but the difference is that our kick is sitting here instead of right below -9 with a nice flat top. Okay, what we'll do now is we're going to go to our first pattern, and we're just going to paste 2 full bars, but we're going to give ourselves a little bit of intro space here, so 4 bars of intro space. And we're going to put a kick in 7 of the next 8 bars. We're going to leave that last bar open. And now we're going to go onto our sidechain first. So we go into here and we highlight 1 beat. So this is a bar, this is a beat because it's a quarter of a bar. Go back into our mixer and we select our bass. So currently it's just looping that one beat. We're going to add in to slot 3 a balance. Then we're going to push it behind the limiter. We're going to go to the knob here, right click, link to controller, go to the input. Sorry, make sure that this is not highlighted. Actually, we're going to create an automation clip first. Sorry, so create automation clip for this one. Close that. Go to the next mid bass, or the next bass, which is here. Add in a balance. Repeat the same process with the channel rack, but this time we're going to right click, link to controller, and under internal controller we're going to select balance. And make sure that this is not highlighted. Accept. So, if we make sure that just the 2 basses are playing, and we go into our playlist, and we adjust this volume here to create an up shape like so. So I've got, say, 60% tension on this here, and what we're going to do is we're going to zoom out, and we're just going to paste this automation all the way through to match every beat of the kick. So you can see that these little dots here are kicks, and we've got a automation whip coming off each of them. So if we take the kick away and we loop this back, you can hear it's pumping now. And when we have the automations finish, it goes back to its original sound, and then when it comes back in, you'll notice the pumping comes back. That's so that the kick has room to breathe, and we're going to do this sidechain on every sound that we have. So we're going to repeat with our leads. Okay, so we'll load up a balance, put it behind the limiter, link to controller, select balance, accept. Do the same with the the second layer for the leads. Add a fruity balance, link that to a controller, and actually I need to add a limiter to this sound as well. Just take the tops off. Cool. If we put the lead and the second lead together, the 2 leads together, and we have the sidechain on, you'll hear the pumping sound again. Okay, so if we add everything back in, including the kicks, we will hear just the bass of the sound. Well, the main idea of the track together. I'm going to bring my sidechain down on tension a bit, so it's got a little bit more effect on the bass and all the other sounds inside. Okay, so now we're starting to build a track, starting to make a bit more sense and sound pretty good. The next bit we're going to go on to is probably the most prominent portion of the track, which of course is the vocal chops. And to do that, we're going to use Slice X. So we're going to right click and insert a Slice X, which of course looks like, once it loads up, a bit slow today, like that. Alright, now everybody that has a copy of FL will have the sample that I used inside this for processing, and that's under Packs, Vocals, and it's the first one, Reverb RA. Drag that right into the sampler section here and drop. First thing that you do after that is turn the auto dump off, otherwise it creates a bunch of markers, and just delete anything that's appeared inside the playlist. Okay, we're going to go and add a new pattern in here, and this is where things get a bit more interesting. First we have to listen to this sound and say, okay, where are the longest held notes in this? So you can tell there's a bit of an upsweep and pitch at the start. So if I pick from about here, make sure I double click to create a solid red line, and I add a marker, which is this button here. If I right click within this first section, that's the first marker, and I think about here is where the rest of the pitch comes through. So it's quite a solid section of sound, and then bring it back a wee bit. But you can tell that because the sound is stopping abruptly with the markers, it's got a little click at the end of it. And we want to get rid of that. To do that, we go to Tools, but make sure that the section that you want to edit is highlighted. So it looks like so. Nice red. Go to Tools, and from there we want to add declick out. And we'll also do declick in just for good measure. Do the same for this first marker. We might not need it, but declicking, you can see it creates a quick fade off. For this one we don't need it because it fades itself, but we will declick in. Okay, I'm going to link that to a mixer channel. Link it in here, bring the volume down a wee bit. Okay, and we're going to go into the piano roll and start messing with the sounds. I usually like to listen back to my sort of main idea of the track, so this loop here. Oh, of course we'll want some sound. If you don't hear anything when you go back to your playlist channel, that's because the sidechain is actually just remembered its position on 0%. So if you click at the end where it's hit 100% and it trails off, then you go back to your playlist, so your piano roll, it'll play back for you. I'm just going to turn my two main layers off. So I've got some quiet volume to make sort of a chop over. And from here, we will mess around with it. When I add something in with Slice X, this is where it gets a bit more interesting. And this bottom control window is going to be your next best friend. So for velocity, we'll keep it, pretty close to 80%. It's around about here. And under control, click that and go to note fine pitch. Now, what you'll see is a window that looks like this, and each of these horizontal lines is a semitone. So if I want to bring this first one up in semitone, so it sounds like we go up one, you'll hear again, and the other one you will hear versus. And this is where we can just mess around with tune and sort of make something random that fits the track. So give me a few seconds, I'll make that and come back. Alright, so I've come up with something here and it sounds a bit like this. Now, if you think that the pitch is slightly out, like these notes are pretty close, we can use our mouse wheel to scroll, and from there we can drag up until we find the nodules of each of them. And we can adjust these in small increments. So you can see some of these are a little bit off on pitch, so we're going to adjust them manually. Cool. And then we can scroll back to get the full 24 range of semitones. Okay. Now from here we're going to go into our mixer channel and we're going to bring a effects option on this one. This is what we have so far. And let's add first our parametric EQ2, cut a little bit of lows out, push a little bit of mid to highs, and on this one we're not going to cut any of the high frequencies off the top because it's one of the most prominent sounds for this tune. So order, steep 8, and we're going to create a high pass again. We're going to put a steep 8 on this one too. And we're just pushing a little bit of mid to high range here as well. Then we bring it back down again. I think we might have to, make a double up on this one. So we'll just go Control A, Control C, and then Control V to drop it in the next two patterns because it's going to repeat over twice. Bring a mix channel back up. And now we can add in our delay 3. Okay, now this is going to be a bit more prominent because it is a full front mode sound for this track. So if we bring the input down, which goes to say about 20% for now. Will probably be a bit too loud, but we'll mess with that. And we're going to use the same settings as the previous. So we've got 3 all the way to the right for pan, ping pong, probably about 25% for our feedback level, and we'll cut a little bit off on a cutoff. Maybe we'll bring that wet down to about 15%. And we'll play that back. Actually, we're going to go 10% on our input because that's actually really good. And a cutoff at about 8,000 hertz. That I'm good with. Next, we're going to go to our Reverb 2. And we're going to do, again, similar to our lead sounds, maybe a little bit more as well. We're going to do a little bit of low cut. We're going to bring our highs all the way up and our damp all the way up. We're probably going to bring these back down in a moment. And our delay we want actually a little bit higher, so around 50 to 60 milliseconds. We'll bring our wet down to about 20%. And a decay, that's about 2 seconds. Play that back. We're going to bring our damps down. I'd say about 10 kilohertz. Play that back. 20 to 23%, 22-23% for the reverb. Now, we're not going to be adding a stereo shaper to this, and I'll tell you why. When we have the leads playing, which are these two, you hear the sounds are on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of your ears, prominently here. You don't really hear much sound in the center of your head, and that's to do with the stereo shaper. So, turn it off. You hear it in the center of your head, you turn it on. It's on each side of your ears, more or less. So if these two sounds complete left and right sides of your ears, then this main sound, and most focus sound, is central. But the effects push a little bit left and right to give it a good stereo image. And that creates a full circle. So with the leads and the vocal cut together, you get pretty straightforward. We're going to add a limiter onto this one. And of course, we're going to do our sidechain as well with the balance. So when we bring that limiter up, we're going to just cut the tops off. Sorry for the CPU cutting out there. And we'll put in our balance as well. Okay, and we'll push that behind the limiter, and then we will link this to the previous controller. And then we can open everything up and go back to our main channel. And we're just actually going to play no kick and just a sidechain, no basses, as just you can get an idea, and we'll add the sounds back in as we go. Okay, and all together now. Alright, now we need to add some variance to our vocal chop because it's a little bit too repetitive. Now to do that, we're just going to solo it so we have that sound only. And we're going to highlight 4 bars because that's basically the length of the pattern before it repeats the pattern itself. We're going to go into the Slice X, click the geared icon at the top. Then we're going to go to the range on the right here and push that to 12. Then we go to the pitch knob right here, right click it, create automation clip. Then we'll get an automation clip the length that we've highlighted. Now what I want to do is scroll in here. I'm going to right click and copy this value on the left, which is its stationary or its static pitch. We're going to, on the last beat of the 4-second bar, paste in a value, paste in one on the start here as well. So you'll have 2 nodules here and here. This is going to go all the way down to 0. And then right above it, we're going to paste another one. So we'll bring it this way. I'd say about 40% tension. And you'll get a sound like this. So it swoops downward. And at the end, I want to go up a little bit, not quite too much. So we'll probably go about, say, 15%, so 66% from 50 is 16%, and then about a 25% tension. So then we'll get a sound like this. Sounds pretty cool. And we'll paste that in both, so it covers the whole section. And now we can play that back. Do you have an idea of what it sounds like? Sounds pretty cool. Alright, now we're on to the sort of more or less final piece, is just adding a effects crash to give it a bit more push, a bit more fill on the total sound. To do that, we're going to use an exhaust from one of the Cashmere packs. We'll drag and drop that in. The first thing we'll do is we'll double click that, so we bring up a sampler window. And we're going to bring our in fade up until it's about, pretty good static line, like a flat line from top to bottom. That just lowers the initial volume, and we're going to link that into a channel. And the first thing we'll do is we'll add our EQ. And from the EQ, we're going to do the same thing that we've done before. First of all, we'll bring the volume down because it's extremely loud. We'll solo it, bring it up a wee bit, about negative 24. And we're going to add a reverb 2 to this as well. So we're going to do our EQ first. Okay, now that we've got the parametric EQ 2, we'll play the sound back over, cut off these lows. And we'll put a little quick slope on the end here too. Okay, reverb, we're going to do something a little different. Now, we're going to bring a low cut up quite high. High cut's going to sit at about 15 kilohertz on both the damp and the high cut. Delay stays where it is, bass comes down, but decay this time is going to go up to about 12 seconds, so really long. Our wet's going to come up to, say, 75%. We'll go 80%. And now we're going to mess with the dry, and you can see what the difference is. If I play back the sound with the dry all the way up, it sounds like that. If I bring the dry all the way down, basically what that's doing is it's taking out the input sound of the crash itself, and it's only playing the reverb, and you can adjust how much of the initial sound or the raw sound that you're going to hear back. So with none, you get solely reverb only. We want to go back to 100%. I'm going to bring it down to say 80%, so that we've got a little bit of a blend between only reverb and raw sound. And that creates a really smooth tail on the end of this exhaust. And then we're going to add a balance. We're going to link this to our balance as well. And this time we're going to add an limiter again. And we'll cut the top off. Okay, now you can see what is happening with the sound. It's got the pumping sidechain, but what I actually want to do is I want the first beat to not have the sidechain. If I take this one out, in which it basically does what it's supposed to, that would also mean that every other sound, the first sidechain is gone too, which would make the kick correlate with the bass and make a horrible sound out of that. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to make a control which turns off the sidechain for one beat, and then it comes right back on. And to do that, we just highlight the one bar that we want to change, go back into the mixer. On the balance, we're going to control this here, the mix level. We're going to right click it. We're going to go create automation clip. And this is what we're going to do here. We're going to create like a big U shape, basically. So it'll look a bit like that, a U. Which means, if we play that back, you can still hear the initial crash in the first beat, but then it starts pumping with the sidechain all the way through. If I take it away, if I bring it back, and that's the sort of sound that I want to go for, and I'm going to copy and paste this on the next 4 bars too, because we want the same sound. Okay, now we have to figure out the volume. It's pretty good, I reckon, where it is for now. And we're going to check a limiter because it's likely, well, it's actually pretty good sitting right on there. Sometimes once you undo that sidechain, the actual sound is a little bit higher and you're cutting off way too much of the tops, but I'm good with that. So now if we play that back, with everything of course, Now, there is one thing that is missing which makes the track not completely full, and that is a sound to fill out the sort of warm, make it a bit warmer, a bit more full. And to do that, we're going to add a piano layer at extremely low volume. So we're going to go into our piano, our playlist here. I'm going to bring up a pattern 1, and we're going to insert an FL keys. Okay, a bit like this. Once we see that, first thing we're going to do is bring our hardness right down, and our sensitivity will go up to 50%. A treble comes right down, or we're going to set that at 0. We might mess with that a little bit as we go. Everything else can stay where it is. And your piano will sound a bit like this. So a nice soft piano. Now if we go into our playlist and we just make sure our basses only are playing, we'll just actually select our main bass. And we'll also make sure that we link this into a channel as well, so the piano is controlled by a channel. We'll bring the volume down a wee bit. So together with the bass, you will have... So the first bass note is C. Now I'm just going to find the chords that suit this one here. We'll set it there, I think. So we copy that across, we'll get... And now we're going to adjust our velocity, so Control A. I'm going to hold down the Shift button, and we're going to set this across halfway through, and that adjusts the velocity of the notes. And that's really quiet, so we'll bring up the volume a wee bit on that. And we're also going to add a stereo shaper to this one, and we're going to use Stereo 3 as the preset. Okay, let's add our preset. Let's add our EQ too. I'm going to pan a little left here, just to try and center that sound a wee bit, because it's a little bit panned right naturally because of the way the piano is recorded. EQ2 is on there. We'll push a little bit in the middle here, bring that down. And of course we're going to add a balance on the end of this, and we'll add that to our sidechain. Okay, so there's our balance. We'll link that to a controller, and we will go to the sidechain, of course. Okay, now if we open everything up, you will hear a difference. So that piano hiding in the background does make a huge difference on how the track actually sounds as an overall fill. And to cut time short, I've added inside the pack, there will be a little sort of pre-made intro for bringing in that particular track, and I've pre-made it here for you as a sample just to take off a bit of the processing required for it. And we're actually just going to link that into a channel as well and bring the volume down a little bit on it too. That's sort of what that sounds like. And we play it all together now. So you notice that the master channel sets up pretty perfectly on the around sort of, -6 decibels, and we're going to want to flatten that out. So we'll add ourselves in a limiter here, and we're going to do just as we've done before by chopping the tops off, but like the very, very slightest bit. And we're going to do that by pushing the gain up until it touches the ceiling, which is the green line that we've used before. And the reason we're doing this is because we're actually pushing the volume of the whole track up. So that'll sound a bit like this. the huge difference that makes, because all you're doing is just pushing the volume up, and because you're topping off the tops a little bit, you can push the volume a bit more before it kicks over 0 dB. So the final product is here, so let's listen back from start to finish. Alright, well there you have it. That is the full tutorial there. If you learned something, please do hit subscribe and get ready for the next tutorial coming in about a month's time. Stay tuned, guys. Loving the comments and everything you guys are leaving me. Any questions, drop them down below. Any requests, drop them down below. And we'll see you in 4 weeks' time. See you later.